let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody is joining via this Zoom meeting. We've intentionally created this as a meeting. If it wasn't COVID times, we'd be on a trade mission in a boardroom together, meeting and discussing as in person, but of course that's not possible, so we're doing it by Zoom. But the way we're structuring these breakout sessions is we want them to be interactive. We'll have a time at the end for some discussion. And so at that point, if you have questions, you can submit them via the chat if you're shy, or you can just unmute yourself and jump in and engage with Doron and our other speakers today. But we're grateful for everyone for joining the Zoom meeting, and also those who are watching live on YouTube and those who will watch the recorded version of this in the days to come. This is the third session of our virtual trade mission to Israel. Yesterday, we had a phenomenal introductory session on doing business in Israel with Consul General Hillel Newman, the Consul General leading Israel's consulate in Los Angeles. We also had a session on technology and innovation with Adiv Baruch, who is one of the pioneers of Israel's tech ecosystem. Of course, Israel is known as a startup nation, and so having Adiv was a great honor, and he provided great insights to our companies that participated in that. I encourage you to go to our website and you can see recordings of both of those sessions. This morning, we're very excited to be joined by Doron Berger-Best Eilan, the president and CEO of Acero, an international security consulting firm. And Doron is also the former director of the Security and Protection Division of the Israel Security Agency, which means that he was Israel's top counterterrorism official, and coming from somebody who spent a lot of time working on counterterrorism issues for the U.S. government. I can tell you that Israel does counterterrorism a phenomenal job. They live in a pretty tough neighborhood, and they provide a lot of really great security to their people, and they're great security partners to the United States. And so, Doron, thank you for your service in that capacity and the work that you're doing now to help companies around the world understand security issues and proceed in an effective manner. We're also very grateful for the chance to hear from two Israeli security companies, Aeronautics and Sapiens. And just a quick reminder, like I mentioned, this is the third session of our virtual trade mission. We have three more. You can go on our website and register. At 9:45 a.m. this morning, we have a water tech breakout session with Danny Lacker, who is the head of water security for Israel. Tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m., we have a life science and healthcare innovation breakout session with Asaf Barnea, who is one of the top healthcare innovation investors in Israel and somebody who has deep experience working both with the Israeli government and private companies and with companies around the world in healthcare innovation. And at 9:45 a.m. tomorrow, we'll have an opportunity to meet with a group of Israeli companies who are who are interested in learning more about doing business right here in Utah. And so again, go to our website. You can register and participate in those meetings as well. And before we jump into the program, I'd just like to recognize our partners on the virtual trade mission to Israel, the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles. Dr. Newman is joining us today. Good to see you, Dr. Newman. We got the Utah-Israel Economic Council, Ron Zamir and Tom Jacobson, and their teams. We're grateful for all their support for these meetings. And also the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We're joined this morning by Franz Kolb, who is such a phenomenal partner for all of us in Utah that are engaging internationally. And I see on my screen, we've got Representative Patrice Arendt, who is a phenomenal representative. I'm her constituent. She represents me and my family in the Utah legislature. So Representative Arendt, thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you on screen. Without further ado, let's jump into our program. I'll first introduce our speaker, Doron Berger-Best Eilan. He will give a presentation on Homeland Security in a post-corona world, similar to one that he gave at the Copenhagen Institute not too long ago, which the Copenhagen Institute is one of the top security think tanks in all of Europe. And so we have an opportunity to hear from him today. After that, we'll have a chance for some discussion. We will then hear from our two companies, Aeronautics and Sapiens. And then Courtney Ray will continue to moderate the discussion up until we run out of time here at the hour mark, at which point we'll all drop off and get ready to jump back on 15 minutes later to talk water. So, Doron Berger-Best Eilan, whose national responsibilities with the ISA included the protection and security of Israeli dignitaries, international internal border crossings, Israeli domestic and international civil aviation, and foreign civil aviation in the state of Israel, Israeli ports and Israeli vessels and foreign ports, Israel's diplomatic security service, and Israel's official delegations traveling abroad, such as Olympic teams, official exhibitions, and other forums. In this capacity, Doron was also responsible for two national authorities, the National Authority for the Protection of Classified Information and the National Cyber Authority for the Protection of Israel's Critical Infrastructure, including energy, transportation, health, and water supply. Doron is the founder, president, and CEO of Acero, where he advises clients on strategic and tactical security challenges and provides assistance to both governments and corporations to prepare, mitigate, and recover from the threats of terrorism and other hazards, protect lives and critical assets, safeguard against cyber threats, enhance emergency preparedness procedures and capabilities, and ensure business continuity of operations. In May 2005, Doron was presented with the Director's Recognition Award, the U.S. Secret Service Director's highest commendation. Today, Doron serves on the Board of Advisor Funds for Pictet and C in Switzerland and as the Consul General of the Republic of Palau to Israel. Doron holds a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master's degree in Political Science, specializing in national security from Haifa University in Israel. He is also a graduate of the Executive Master of Business Administration program at Tel Aviv University. And so, Doron, again, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. We are very grateful, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I'll go ahead and pass the baton over to you.
Well, thank you, Miles. I would like first, by the way, that was the longer version of my CV. Thank you for that. I planned on a shorter one. Never mind. Thank you very much, Miles. I would like to thank the Utah government, the Utah World Trade Center, the Israeli Consul General, and obviously, last but not least, the Israeli Export Institute for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. So when I was approached by the Export Institute, I was kind of thinking about what could be a good topic, given the fact that I'm not speaking on behalf of Acero, I'm actually talking about Homeland Security in general. And I thought that a good topic could be Homeland Security in the post-corona world, and obviously I will tie it to Israel capabilities and export mission. So no reason to repeat that. I think that that is all clear. And I would like to start right away, giving the limited time provided to me. So COVID-19 will continue to have a significant impact, and I will explain impact in a minute, on the world we live in. I don't think anybody doubt that today. Maybe 4 months ago, people had doubts about that. I don't think that's the case today. So the question is, where will we see the changes? So first of all, I think that we can actually look at 4 major areas of changes. First, in the international/global level, national level, the social level, and obviously the operational level. Now, when I say the impact is definitely subject to the duration of the crisis. It's actually longer than some anticipated several months back. So the duration, how long will it continue? The second thing is the number of fatalities. We crossed the 600,000 fatalities already worldwide, and it's still going up. And I think that when we cross the 1 million, definitely the impact of Corona-19 will be even more significant. And some of the things that I will speak about today will speed up and will have a more significant impact on all of us. So I will today speak about those 4 areas of changes and how does that reflect on Homeland Security, with your permission. So on the international global level, we understand that some of the changes will be short-term and some will be long-term, but I think we can all agree, or some of us will agree, that the changes will be in increased global polarization. We see that every day, I believe. Every news report, we hear more about that. Seeking out alternative supply chain routes. For instance, Malaysia, Vietnam, other countries will actually emerge stronger than before, alternative to China. We'll see decreasing dependency on China in favor of domestic production and local investments in alternative technologies to replace cheap labor. I think Utah as a state will certainly look at it and ask how can they fill the void, if there is a void, as I anticipate. The United States already left the World Health Organization. It has implications. We see change in the structure and transparency of international organizations, the UN, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, and the Court of Justice. So we will see a strong push to more transparency and different ethics and behavior of those international organizations. We'll see significant reduction in domestic and international movements. We already see that. I guess none of us travel overseas in recent months, including banning red countries or regions citizens from traveling. So it could be domestically, and it could be internationally obvious, but also domestically. We've seen that before. We will have more restrictions on transfer of knowledge and deployment of foreign technologies. We'll have regional cooperation will give way to internal disagreements, both in the EU and Asian and other countries and other regions. We'll see harsh penalties imposed upon countries for behavior deemed irresponsible. And we'll see increased xenophobia and restrictions on immigration. So these are some of the changes that we'll see on international and global level, in my view. Some of them will be already started, some of them will follow. So some of them will be short-term, some will be long-term, but I think that we're moving in that direction, and this is something to keep in mind. On the national level, we'll see increased tension between and among federal, state, and regional authorities and government bodies. This tension gonna grow as the pandemic continues, and its impact, as I mentioned earlier, become even harsher. We'll see surge in vaccination-related tensions. So we're all expecting vaccination, but you can imagine when we have the vaccine, there will be a lot of tension of who's getting it first, what country get it first, in the country. How do we distribute it? Who get it first? Inside the rich, the poor, and so forth. We'll see social, ethnic, and racial disputes that escalate to violence. I think we've seen some of it in some countries. Definitely we've seen that in the US. We'll see decline in urbanization due to social distancing and remote work. These are some examples of national level changes that I think that the COVID-19 pushes. Some of them were already in motion before, but definitely COVID-19 pushed those vectors significantly. On the social level, we see the social distancing, and social distancing will stay with us for quite a long time, and remote work, which actually contribute to social distancing, or social distancing remote contribute to remote work, and this will have a significant impact on our lives. We'll see, as I mentioned earlier, increased ethnic tensions, including xenophobia, and increased social conflict between rich and poor, driven by a combination of social and economic stress. Now, getting closer to the topic of this presentation, the question is, how does this translate to the operational level? So the increase in remote work and remote learning, we need technologies and practices to facilitate that. We'll see increased surveillance for epidemic control and mitigation. So we'll give up for more surveillance. We'll be willing to give some of our freedoms and some of our liberties in order to control and mitigate epidemic, by the way, not only today, but future epidemics as well. We'll see additional measures to curb illegal immigration. More efforts will be put in that respect. We can assume that some of those that were not necessarily supporting dealing with illegal immigration will actually be more receptive to harsher measures that were not used before. We'll see a ramp up screening at existing and additional checkpoints to include epidemic-related indicators. So the current checkpoints that we have will also have measures to deal with epidemic-related indicators. I don't think that we will have additional checkpoints, but in already existing checkpoints, we'll see additional technologies and practices. We'll see increased government investments in medicine and the classification of medicine as a national security factor. Today, vaccination or medicines to deal with pandemics are mostly the private sector business. They take the risk, they get the gains. Governments are not so much involved in that. I think we'll see a change in that respect. It will be defined as part of national security, and governments will get more involved in that and support the private sector and maybe even lead that effort from now on. We'll see growth in cyber attacks by adversaries aimed at pushing national, private/crime or social objectives. We see that already. It's happening it happened before, and it's actually happening even more so in the last several months. And I anticipate that we'll see more attacks for many different reasons, actually derived from some of the points that I mentioned earlier, but it could be for crime-related, social related, and we'll see a spike in cyber warfare. And I actually define between the two. Cyber warfare is on a different magnitude, and we already see that in the Middle East, even more so in the last several months. And we'll see acceleration of remote payments, shopping, deliveries, autonomous vehicles, all these issues that support the social distancing and the other things that I referred to. So where will HLS related solutions come into play? So if we agree that some of the operational changes, and more, by the way, that I didn't mention, then we can see that Homeland Security in its broad definition support all of that. So increase in remote work and remote learning, we'll see integrity protection. We need to protect the integrity of our data, the integrity of our operation. This is definitely under the responsibility of what is defined as Homeland Security. Increased surveillance and epidemic control and mitigation, that's a clear Homeland Security responsibility. Additional measures to curb illegal immigration, definitely Homeland Security. Ramped in screening, again, Homeland Security. Increased government investments in medicine and the classification of medicine as a national security factor. We see already issues of IP and supply chain protection, and we'll see that even more so in coming months. Homeland Security related solutions will have to support that. We'll see growth in cyber attacks by adversaries aimed at pushing national, private, or social objectives. Cyber warfare and acceleration in remote payment, again, the integrity. So all of these and beyond will need Homeland Security to support it. In other words, Homeland Security or Homeland Security application technologies and best practices are the enabler of some of the changes that we may like, we may not like these changes, but these changes are actually already in motion, and Homeland Security will have to enable them to realize, and this is something that it's important to keep in mind. Let's talk a little bit about the Israeli perspective of all of that. So Israel should not miss the opportunity to boost Israel's reputation as a leader in Homeland Security. So that's it's COVID-19 is a bad thing for everybody, no doubt. But out of this crisis, we certainly need to identify the opportunities, and Israel has a great reputation, as was mentioned earlier, as a leader in Homeland Security, and this is an opportunity for Israel innovation, technologies, and best practices to come into play in supporting the changes that I envision to happen. As a forced pioneer in fighting terrorism for over half a century, Israel has created a name for itself in the field of technology development, applications, and solutions for physical, cyber, and business opportunity, continuity, and all of that come into place now. And I think it's important to note and to mention it again and again that Israel's vision, and also was my policy in office, Israel's vision and policy has always been to cooperate and share our best practices and capabilities with our allies. So a few concluding remarks before I take questions, if there are any questions. So COVID-19 is impacting on our lives, our behavior, and the way we do business on both the micro and the macro levels, and we continue to and will continue to impact us for years to come. Security and defense methodologies and technologies and applications will serve as enablers to safely meet the associated challenges we will face. Those were my concluding remarks. Miles?
Thank you. I'll actually jump in there. Thank you, Doron. That was so incredible and so informative. We really appreciate that. I know we're in the interest of time having to jump right into questions. And I have two on your presentation that was so informative. You'd mentioned that there will be more restrictions on transfer of knowledge and deployment of foreign technologies. Can you expand on that a little bit? Do you mean that you think international business will be thwarted? And why do you think we would see that? Because I would think governments and companies would want to continue to have businesses thrive.
Well, I believe that the protection of IP and trade secrets will become even more important in the coming years. That is related to all kind of tensions, global international tensions that we already facing. This, on one hand, is not theoretically is bad for business, but in practicality, we'll see a lot of the opportunities coming back domestically. So first of all, we have to acknowledge it. We have to understand that we'll see more restrictions. Government will get more involved with that. So we have to understand that this is where we're heading. That's one thing. The second thing, we need to ask ourselves, so if this is the situation, what is the opportunity that lie in front of us, and grab it with two hands, and the sooner the better.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Especially in line with defense and whatnot, and hopefully relationships with Israel and the U.S. Hopefully some of those sort of things prevail, where you have long-term partnerships and friendships that hopefully trust can prevail in certain situations. But one can hope, right? You also talked about how we will give us some of our freedoms to control the epidemic, because that becomes a homeland security issue. And of course, Israelis are used to adjusting to emergency situations because that involves homeland security. Do you see this as something where Israel will adjust quickly, but in the US we see people fighting that? Do you think that they will tolerate that change in the interest of homeland security from your experience?
First of all, in my opinion, one of the things that I take from watching what had happened in Israel and maybe in the US, I definitely can speak about Israel, but also maybe applicable to the US as well, is the need for trust. You need to trust your leaders to tell you and what need to be done. People are expecting to hear what need to be done. Now, speaking for Israel, when you have this trust, like when we had in what is called the first wave, the trust was working very well for everybody. When people start second guessing, things actually deteriorated very, very quickly. And they become less and less compliance with the guidance, let me say that, the guidance that they have received. So one of the things that I think beyond the technologies, beyond the vaccination, beyond all of that, I think that one of the things that we need to take from what had happened is how do we manage this crisis on a public level. Obviously, I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm saying that, and I'm saying that we need to acknowledge that, we need to understand it, and we need to develop ways of dealing with these challenges that we haven't dealt with before in the future, because pandemics, unfortunately, as Bill Gates says, will repeat periodically in the future.
Okay, thank you. You've also talked about an increase in cyber attacks and just in general, so many of us working at home. What trends do you see in securing small office or home offices? You know, a lot of people have important information to protect and they aren't tech savvy. How can they protect themselves?
So for small offices, my view has always been that it's mostly awareness. It's not so much about the technology. It's mostly about the awareness. Most of the attacks are carried out by means of human engineering, as we call it. Someone manipulating you, and as a result, you lose your assets, your information, whether it is to ransom or simply stolen from you, or for business competition or whatever. So when we speak about small businesses, my advice has been always awareness, awareness, awareness. Awareness will save you most of the potential threats, will save you from most of the potential threats, and that combined with what is already provided by your network providers, by your computer services and so forth, will give you probably a decent protection, unless you're looking at a persistent a persistent attacker, or someone that targets you specifically because of something specific that you have. But if you, I would say, just like anyone else, then awareness and education is the most important thing for small businesses. Okay,
thank you. The majority, along those lines, the majority of security compromises result from enterprises not following well-documented best practices. So along those lines, you know, why do you think that is? And is it maybe just not being as aware? And what do you consider the best practices? Can you sort of be specific on best practices that you think would be helpful?
So again, I'm in a sense, I'm repeating myself. The best practices are very clear, and there are not many of them, by the way. Very few best practices that if you follow, you are relatively protected. And you know, don't open attachments. I don't want to get into the details because I don't think this is proper now. But you know, don't open attachment that you're not familiar with. Don't surrender your credentials. All these things that we are all aware of. But these are very simple things, but you can imagine how many people fail in doing that. So small businesses, I'm not talking about enterprises. Enterprises is a totally different thing. But small businesses, private businesses, private owner businesses. This is 90% of the protection is done by best practices that people should. They probably know them, but they don't carry them.
So just one more question along that line, and then we'll move on to the two companies that are presenting. Can you name cutting edge technologies or companies that will be vital in light of those challenges?
So if we have 2-3 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about cyber, because this is the area that you talking about, cyber defense. The term cyber, and I founded the discipline of cyber defense in the state of Israel. I started the authority for the protection of our critical infrastructure, and I envisioned that back in 1996, when we didn't call it cyber. Cyber is a Hollywood name, as you know, that follows some of those movies that actually came about that time. So what happened up until recently is that we kind of mimic the physical world that actually I come from. The physical protection world is actually building walls and barriers and so forth. And we gave them different names in the cyberspace. We always saw, and I don't know of any exception, that a persistent attacker was always capable of bypassing those defense. And that's actually why I mentioned if you don't have anything specific that need to be specifically or specially protected, then the best practices is enough. But if you have someone who is persistent, he will always penetrate those the current cyber defense practices and technologies. In the future, we will move from that concept. We're already moving from that concept, and this is the answer to your question, to a different paradigm. And the paradigm is the integrity of your data. So if your data integrity is intact, then you are protected. So what we need to do is we need to worry about the integrity of the data, not the idea of preventing someone that will eventually penetrate, preventing someone from penetrating your system, but assuming that someone already penetrated, how do I keep the integrity of my data? And the second thing that we'll see, and this will come from not from physical security, but from biology. We spoke about pandemic and medicine and so forth, but we'll probably see self-healing systems. Systems will identify changes and will immediately recover by changing them back to the original. And there are some companies, including Israeli companies, that start taking that path of moving from building additional walls. Israel there's still big business in that respect, because everybody is doing what is actually implementing best practices. But in the future, and we already see that we'll see protection of integrity of data, and second, self-healing systems. And this is really the future of cyber defense, and it starts with OT, and it will get to IT, and eventually it will get to private businesses as well.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to go over now to our speakers from Aeronautics and Sky Sapiens, who will speak for 5 minutes each. We will start with Limor Barak from Sky Sapiens. Sky Sapiens is the leading tethered hovering platform worldwide. They're field proven for defense and enterprise challenges, and they offer solutions for real-time intelligence and communication challenges. Some of their applications are Homeland security, border control, perimeter protection, mass event monitoring, search and rescue, law enforcement, and more. So we'll go ahead and Limor Barak, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development, will go ahead and start. Go ahead, Limor.
Thank you so much. If you could share the movie, please. I'll show you a 2-minute short video about our leading product, who serves as the leading tethered platform worldwide. Hold on just a second with the movie, please. Thank you. We have operational technology systems like that working in the United States, in Asia, in Europe, and of course in Israel. I'll be happy to answer any question you might have following this movie. So, thank you. So what you just saw is Sky Sapiens Hovermast 100. It goes up to 150 meters, take about 80 kilograms of payload, which can be electrical, optical payload, the cameras, night cameras, lasers, communications, RF technologies, cellular communication, whatever it is the customer is using it for. We can integrate almost any kind of payload, can withstand very strong winds, very harsh weather, rains, dust, everything works on the move. Whatever it is you need to do in terms of cyber security, cyber communication, we're on it. The system is being used alongside borders, perimeters, control, special forces, and even civilian applications around the world. It is cyber immune to any kind of terror attack because all the communication is going through the cable. You have seen it cannot be jammed, it cannot be hacked from afar. And the limitation of the time frame of operating the systems are almost indefinite because it receives all the power from the ground and can integrate to any kind of command and control center that the customer already have. Now I'll be happy to answer any kind of question.
Sorry, I was muted. I think we'll go right into our next presentation. And by the way, feel free everyone to not be shy and either be prepared with questions or to put them up on the chat function so that I can refer to them. And we'll go right into aeronautics and then do some questions right at the end if that's okay. Matan Perry is also the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development at Aeronautics Limited. Aeronautics provides integrated turnkey solutions based on unmanned systems, platforms, payloads, and communications for defense and civil applications. They're operationally proven solutions for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems requirements. So go ahead, Matan. Matan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you quite well. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you please show the presentation?
You need me to share it, or are you going to share it yourself?
No, if you can share it, it will be great.
Perfect. Go ahead and start the video.
No, the presentation first.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. I would go ahead and get started with the talking and I'll load the presentation in just 1 second.
Okay, great. So First of all, thank you for the opportunity to explore a bit and to speak about Aeronautics. Aeronautics is an Israeli-based company for the past 23 years, and we're specializing in UAVs, unmanned air vehicles or unmanned air systems. Aeronautics is a group of companies, so Aeronautics Group. Aeronautics is the manufacturer, the designer and manufacturer of UAVs, unmanned air vehicle platforms. We have 5 more subsidiaries. One subsidiary is Controp. Controp is a payload manufacturer, electro-optical and infrared cameras. The other one is Arti. Arti is an aerospace company that's doing balloons, tactical balloons, mainly for Homeland security, but also for defense segments, border control, and border protection. Contact is a communication company that in Israel they are mostly known beside of manufacturing communication for UAVs, the communication between the ground segment to the aerial vehicle, but in Israel they are mostly known because they are the manufacturer of the communication for the Rafael Iron Dome system, the system that protecting Israeli cities against mortars and rockets. And Zanzotera is a company that's manufacturing engines, fully owned by Aeronautics. So as you can see, we have a wide span of companies that we have all of the building blocks in order to give a full turnkey solution to our clients, both and mainly in the unmanned segments. Having said that, Aeronautics 2 years ago, we recognized that in order to be able to market our products wisely in North America, in the States and in Canada, it would be wise for us to have a local presence in the US. And we have one of our subsidiaries is a company by the name of CP. CP is an American company that's being purchased by Aeronautics almost 2 years ago, that's located in San Diego. And they are manufacturing ruggedized computing that is most helpful for us in our system, and they are our marketing and manufacturing background in the US. In those days, we're starting our new facilities in Arizona in order to have also runway and other facilities that is needed for our activities in North America. If now you can put the clip, you can play the clip, sorry.
Pulling up right now.
Great. So what you can see here is Aeronautics Orbiter 4. It's mainly for the defense segment, I must say it quite openly. However, we can find several use cases for Homeland security. And the breakthrough idea is that we have a payload of, or multiple payloads of the total weight of between 12 to 14 kilograms in a very small and compact unmanned vehicle. The maximum takeoff weight is around 100 pounds. That can also be with satellite communication or line of sight communication. In here you can find several types of payloads, and they can do different kind of activities from defense activity, proper defense activity that's being used by armed forces, but as well as border protection, wide area scanning, mapping, and also we can find some of the activities that being launched after earthquakes and floods in order to give wide area scanning of areas to realize which of the areas are being damaged and where to send immediately the rescue teams. Different kind of payloads can be accommodated. By the way, some of them are American, most of them are Israeli-made payloads, and again, it depends by the end user according to the mission that need to be taken. That's our main product for in 2020. Is leading the category worldwide, being used in more than 4 different end users, and can be accommodated according to the needs. In here you can find different kind of aeronautics platforms that being controlled from the same ground station. Truly believe that 5 minutes are off, so I want to leave some time for the question and answers, if it's possible. Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh, are you, okay, so are you turning off the video then now?
Yeah, if it's possible, and in order, if you have any questions, I can.
Yes. So I have a question for both you and Limor, and maybe even Duran as well. So we have a company who I believe is on the phone named Fordham in Utah, and they have been hired. Their drones have been hired to protect the Olympics in Japan, which obviously have been postponed. And they've also been hired by several governments to protect their airports from attack by UAS systems. And they're also a counter UAS, and they can capture drones with explosives and bring them down, et cetera. It's a really fascinating company. I'm curious, do either of you know Fordham? And can you also give advice to a company like Fordham if they wanted to expand or partner, or any of our companies that are on the phone that are, some are smaller, some are more established, that want to grow or expand or partner in Israel that are similar to Fordham? What advice would you give to them about growing their business over there and partnering, and who should they approach about that?
Matan, do you want to go first?
Yes, one thing that I haven't mentioned, that Aeronautics 6 months ago, or a bit more than 6 months ago, have been acquired. 50% of Aeronautics has been acquired by Rafael. Rafael is an Israeli governmental entity, a large defense company and well-known one. I truly believe the most technological one. And one of the products is an anti-drone system, the Iron Dome, that being used according to what I read in the Heathrow accident of using drones that shut down Heathrow. And because of that, it will be to advise how to try to market undrone systems in Israel, because this is part of our portfolio. However, we believe that the way to conduct this kind of businesses, is to truly try to find a solid Israeli company that have both technological experience, but it completes their portfolio. And in that sense, they will be able to promote it in Israel, to open markets and to open doors. By the way, this is the same thing that we are doing in the States or in any other countries that we want to market our products, to find a company that together we have a more solid portfolio of products.
Good advice. Limor, do you have any other suggestions for?
Yeah, I completely agree with Matan. Just one more thing. I think we can add that a company manufacturing in the United States may use the FMS monies in order to sell products to Israel. Then the Israeli army will be more likely to buy it. So we can discuss it later if you would like.
And just to jump in real quickly, that's a really great point. I just want to flag for everybody that just last week, we did an event with the Israeli Ministry of Defense. We had about 60 Utah aerospace and defense companies who were able to be trained by the Israeli Ministry of Defense on how to jump into that procurement process. We're following up with several different companies right now. And so for any companies that missed that session last week, you can go to our website, you can find it there. Would really encourage you to watch that, and then to reach out to us, because we are very actively engaged in helping companies jump in and participate in that process. Sorry, Duran, I think you had some thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, I'll be very happy to hear more details about them and see if I can give them advice and maybe open doors for them, but not only in Israel, but in other places as well. So have them contact me. I believe you have my email address.
Yes, appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for these two wonderful companies? You have really excellent products. It's exciting to see what you're accomplishing. Thank you. Duran, I have a question for you. When we look at your company, Acero, it's just so, it's really exciting. And of course, your background is so fantastic. Can you give us some sort of case studies or some of the examples of the things that you have been most excited about? I'm sure live projects are hard to talk about, but maybe some of the things where you've assisted governments or corporations to prepare for other threats that you think are things that are worth sharing.
Yeah, so I'm happy to. So one of the most exciting, the most exciting project you do is the current one, right?
Yes.
It's always the current one, right? So we're currently doing a unique project for one of the leading countries, countries in aviation ecosystem. So what we do, it means that they have airport and they have airline and other facilities. So what we're doing is we're looking at the cyber threat to aviation ecosystem from a holistic approach. So not from a silo approach, like look at the airline and see identify their vulnerabilities, look at the airport, look at the vulnerabilities, but look at the ecosystem as a holistic approach, because this is how the adversary will look at you, whether it's a state or organization or individual. So there are interdependencies between the different components of this ecosystem. They're mostly technological components, and they cross between the different stakeholders. So from the airport to the airline, from the service provider to the catering and so forth. So what we've done for that government is we looked at the ecosystem, we mapped all the technology components, we identified the critical, and then we identified the interdependencies. So this is something that we're currently doing. I'll be very happy to share a case study that we're doing on that. And because this is the right approach to defend whatever ecosystem we're talking about. In this particular case, it's aviation. And I think it's fascinating. And this is what we currently engaged in. But we work for Delta Airlines. We were the security consultants for LaGuardia Terminal C, that they will be the landlords there for other airports, that other terminals that they've been involved in. We developed some of the programs. We work for the TSA, developed the aviation freight risk-based security. By the way, I should also mention that we have, in conjunction with the Tel Aviv University and ACES, the American Society for Industrial Security, we have a biannual training session on risk management at the Tel Aviv University in Israel, which we encourage, and we have very senior US officials and private sector leaders attending in Israel. You can find it on the web. It's called HSECS, the Homeland Security Certificate at the Tel Aviv University. So there are many different programs that we've done. We recently finished consulting the Montreal airport on some of the brownfield changes that they've done, including a transportation hub that they are building at the airport and so forth. But I can actually go on and on and on. So it runs from cyber to business continuity to supporting terminals, doing the threat vulnerability risk assessments and so forth. I'll be very happy to give additional information. For the benefit of the audience, then I will say that you can find me on Acero Worldwide and my team, and we'll be very happy to share case studies and ideas with others for their benefit and beyond.
That's great. Thank you. Yes, very important work and exciting. I think we'd all love to see more about that. Okay, so we're wrapping up time, but I want to make sure we answer anyone's questions here. Does anyone want to submit any, or Miles, do you have any questions, or anyone else in the audience? I could certainly go on, but I want to make sure that we have everyone's questions answered.
Pause real quick and see, last chance if anybody has any additional questions before we wrap up. Going once, going twice. All right, there we go. So we'll call it a day. Thank you, Courtney, for moderating that discussion. Duran, Limor, Matan, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your perspectives. I learned a lot, especially on the Homeland security issues. Duran, thank you for that. And it's incredible to see the technology being developed in Israel. And as I was watching those videos and learning about those companies, you know, there were several Utah companies that came in mind that are doing things in parallel or that they could be additive. So I think the key takeaway from everybody on the Utah side is that now you know Matan, you know Limor, you know Duran, you know that you've got partners in Israel, people with expertise. They would be more than happy to jump on a phone call and to help you understand what the opportunities are in Israel and how you can engage and take advantage of it. So thank you for our speakers. Thank you for everybody for attending. We'll go ahead and end this session, and then we'll reconvene here in 15 minutes for anybody who's interested, who is not registered yet. Again, we have Danny Lacker, who is the head of water security for Israel, to talk about water technology. That's in 15 minutes. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.